Hi, this is Bethany with the Birth and Body podcast. Welcome to the show. I have a really special guest here today. She is a mom of 3 on the outside expecting another baby. Do we know gender yet? No,
we don't find out.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Okay, due in January.
Mm-hmm.
She's been married for 5 years, so welcome to the show, Carrie.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you because you've had some different natural birth experiences, all outside the hospital, but all kind of different.
Yes.
So thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Well, I'd love to hear about how you kind of researched and decided you were interested in having natural births from the beginning, knew you wanted to do it a certain way. I'd love to hear how you kind of came about that.
I think a big influence was my married friends at the time. Well, not at the time. My friends who got married before me and started having children before me, we weren't like an all-natural kind of group of people.
Sure,
we were actually friends from church, but many of them had decided to have unmedicated births.
Sure.
And I don't want to say they didn't complain about it, but it was just kind of just part of their story.
Yeah.
And so that's what introduced me to the concept of it, because I guess until then, honestly, I hadn't even thought about birthing.
Sure. It wasn't so much on your radar.
Right, it wasn't on my radar.
Yeah.
But so then it was on my radar, and then really the more I thought about it, I'm definitely a researcher and a reader.
Yeah.
And so I read and read and read. And I would say a lot of what I picked up certainly was just anecdotal. Some of it was proper studies, scientific studies with cross sections and like all that scientific stuff.
Sure.
But what I read that really set my mind to, I want to do this, was one, women's bodies are specifically made for this. It's not the only thing they're made for, but they are specially designed to be able to do this. And birthing in a hospital, at least in the West, is a relatively new phenomenon. Right. I mean, like in the history of humanity.
Right. Thousands versus 100 and something years.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so for generations, women birthed outside of the hospital, and of course there were higher maternal and infant mortality rates, but also the medicine that was available to them even just 50 years ago was very different than now.
More dangerous for sure.
Right. Yeah. But then also I read in some of the books, and I can give you the titles if you want, but that
I'd be curious.
Births in hospitals tend to have higher intervention rates, even for unmedicated birth plans.
Yeah.
And I thought, if my body was designed to do this and I can do this, then I want to try to do it. Like, I want to commit. I want to do it.
Sure. Yeah.
So I went on this search. We were living in Fort Worth at the time, so I went on the search for a birth center. Oh, pardon me. With midwives who had hospital privileges, so that I could be fully not in the hospital, but if necessary, they could escort me and continue the work where I needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what kind of books you mentioned did you read to prep and everything for that first birth?
For the first birth,
or anything I guess you might have used to prep. I'm sure you did more than books, but
I read excerpts that I could find online from Ina May Gaskins.
Yeah.
I didn't read her whole book, but whatever excerpts I could read from her, and then other natural birth websites. That's pretty much what led me to the birth center.
Sure.
And then I'm gonna jump forward just a little bit. You'll probably ask this question. I'm sorry, I'm gonna answer it out of order.
Okay.
But what led me to seeking a home birth was Ina May Gaskins' childbirth.
Yeah, Ina May's Guide to Childbirth.
Yes.
Yeah.
I read that book in its entirety.
Sure.
And I thought, this is amazing.
Sure.
And if women can give birth in a barn or on the side of a hill, I can do this in my home.
Oh, sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite books
It's
to recommend.
now one of
for
mine
sure.
too. Yeah.
Because it just has such great stories. And also, I think the first half really explains why interventions might not be ideal or work as well or lead to C-sections. And then, second half is stories, which is so great.
Yes. And also, and not to diminish the work that OBs do, but it kind of explained how they're trained as surgeons. And birthing women don't always need surgeons.
Sure.
Sometimes they do, but I think for the majority of healthy women with low risk pregnancies, we don't need surgeons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's true, surgeons do look at it a little differently. That it's more hindsight's 2020. Now we can look back and see it was normal versus just seeing this is normal until something tells us it's not normal. So tell us, how did your first birth go?
It was traumatic. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But there were elements of trauma.
Yeah.
It was a very long labor. And part of that may be that it was my first, so I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
I had taken a birth class, and I think also I was in my head a lot.
Sure.
I was trying to mark the stages of labor and thinking that would help. Like if I knew mentally, that would help, but me knowing mentally didn't help me at all.
Sure.
Everyone's different, but it didn't help me at all. And so I would get, I think, a little overeager about when I thought I was moving into the next phase of labor.
Sure.
And also I had back labor.
Yeah.
So I felt what the textbooks that I had read said you will feel in more active labor. I think I was feeling that earlier.
Sure.
And so I thought I was farther along than I was. So we went to the birthing center once in the afternoon, the late afternoon, early evening, and they told us to go home and labor some more at home. And that was disheartening because even just getting to the birth center was so painful. It was just dreadful driving in the car to get to the birth center and having contractions and having to wait at stoplights. And I just thought, I'm going to explode.
Sure.
And so being told we have to go home. So we went all the way back home. And at the time I was living in Arlington. And so that's about a 20-minute drive. And then we labored some more until the birth center had closed, and we called the on-call midwife, and she said, well, why don't you come on by? So I think it was maybe 7 or 8 p.m., and I'll check you. And she did an exam, and I still wasn't far enough along for her to let me in. So she said, I'm so sorry, but you have to go back home. And my husband worked in Fort Worth, and so this is going to sound so strange. We went to his workplace and spent the night.
Yeah.
And I labored, and they had this great big open floor space where I could do lunges and just walk and crawl and do, all the things.
Yeah.
And they also had couches. So we would nap on the couch, and I was just waiting. I didn't feel like I was doing anything. I was just waiting. And
kind of in limbo.
Right. Thinking I was ready, but being told, no, you're not ready.
Sure.
I think that was the hardest part.
Sure.
That was the hardest part mentally.
Yeah, totally.
Physically, laboring moms know what the hardest part is.
Yeah.
So then, let's see, I think his office was about to open up, so we had to get out of there. So around 6:30 or 7, we got back in the car, and I said, we've just got to go. I've got to go ask them if they'll let me in, because I can't go back to the house, just have to turn around and do this all again.
Sure.
And she said, well, you're still like half a centimeter short, but come on in.
Okay.
So they let me in at, I'm going to just say 7 in the morning. And then I labored there not quite 12 hours. David was born that afternoon between 3 and 4.
Okay.
So several more hours.
Yeah. Okay. That early phase was just quite long.
Oh, it was so long.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. But it was somewhere between what comes after early labor and the next part.
Active
But
and
it was somewhere in between there. Like maybe it was just going back and forth like a pendulum. I don't know, but it was exhausting.
Yeah.
And I remember reading in the books that I need to sleep and eat and drink and rest. And I was trying to do all those things, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
Part of that I think was also just excitement.
Yeah.
So they checked us in, and I think about later morning, early afternoon, I called our chiropractor, and she came out and gave me an adjustment and taped me up in some strange places, but it helped.
Sure.
That helped a lot. And then fast forward a couple more hours, and I was having a contraction leaning against the bed, and my water broke. And then I stood up and I said, I need to get in the bathtub. And so they let me in the tub, and then there was some coaching to push, and then David was born.
Wow. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So pushing wasn't quite as long. Do you remember?
Pushing was so fast.
Okay.
Yeah, I think David came out, I want to say within 45 minutes.
Okay.
Like from the time my water broke, David was out in 45 minutes.
Okay. So just that dilation phase.
Yeah. That was the hardest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then how about for Augie?
Augie was much calmer. For Augie, my water broke. I don't even remember what part of the day. I was laying on the couch, and I think we were talking about dinner, so maybe it was late afternoon.
Sure.
And then I rolled, like pregnant women do. When you're laying on a couch, you kind of roll, waddle, squish off a couch, and my water broke. And so I just calmly, I said, Tom, my water broke.
Yeah.
Which was so very different from David, because David, it was water break.
Sure.
Here he comes.
Sure.
But so my water broke, but I hadn't really felt any major contractions yet. So this was very out of order for me. This is almost like a first birth all over again.
Yeah.
But this time way more peaceful. This time we lived only 7 minutes away from the birth center. And we chose the same birth center again. I loved those midwives. They were wonderful. And so even just knowing it's only 7 minutes away, I think was very calming for me.
Sure.
Because I knew it wasn't going to be a 20-minute car ride. It was just 7 minutes.
Sure.
It's like that. Anybody can do anything for 5 minutes. Well, this is just 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So that was very peaceful. So I called the midwife and I let her know that my water had broken, but I wasn't feeling any major contractions. So I'm happy to labor at home. Just want to let you know. She said, okay, great.
Sure.
Check in with me if things start to progress, or just call me in a couple hours and we'll take it from there.
Sure.
But I think I even went until like 9 or 10 o'clock that same evening, and the contractions were progressing, but they still weren't as intense as I remembered having early on with David. And so she said, well, it's 10 o'clock. Why don't you just come in and let me check you? And so we did. We went on in. And then I don't remember her ever telling me how far along I was dilated. And I think that was good for me to not know. I was out of my head that much. But I was still marking the phases of labor that I thought I was in.
Sure.
And I crawled around the floor in their birthing suite. And then at some point, the midwife noticed a change in my voice or my tone. And she said, I think it's time for you to get... Oh, sorry. One thing before that. She had to re-break my water.
Okay.
She had noted that my water did in fact break.
Sure.
But then it sealed back up.
Okay.
I wasn't aware that could even happen.
Yeah.
So she asked if I was already starting to crawl on the floor. And she said, would you like me to do this? And I said, will that speed things up? And she said it should.
Sure.
And I said, well, let's go. And normally I'm a no intervention person, but my water had already broke. So I thought, well, let's just get on with it.
Yes.
So I let her rupture my membranes, and then things progressed rather fastly. So I think I got back on the floor and started crawling again after that. And then she noticed rather quickly that the tone of my voice changed. And she said, why don't we hop in the tub? And then she coached me through pushing. And this time I remember feeling like her coaching me through pushing was not as, like, not as in my flow.
Sure.
Like she would,
kind of
maybe it
took
was-
you out of your
Yes.
normal, natural flow. Yeah.
And I think she noticed that also because at one point she started coaching me differently. And I remember she said, think down, like you have to push down. And I thought, and I even verbalized, I said, I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know how to do what you're telling me to do. So she lovingly, she got in my face. And I know that could be like an aggressive thing, but this was done out of care and love. And she got in my face and she said, look in my eyes. And the next time you do that, I need you to push your bottom into the tub instead of out some other direction that she noticed I was pushing. So I did that. And then, of course, I think within 2 pushes, Augie was born.
Yeah. Okay.
But that one, the early, all the way up to actually birthing Augie, that birth experience was so much more peaceful than with David. But I felt like the actual birthing out of Augie was maybe more traumatic than with David. And some of it may have even been that he was my second. And so I had this conception of, well, if the first parts of labor have gone this way, then when he actually comes out will be much less. And I think I also tore more significantly with Augie. So even recovery was harder. Yeah. And that, I think that played a bigger part in my trauma as well.
Sure. That's understandable.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't talk about that healing after. It can be really hard.
Oh, it's so hard.
Some people have no problem and others can be really long.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Do you, if you don't mind, if you're okay with sharing and don't mind me asking, did you find anything helpful as you process the harder parts of their labors, or for someone who might feel that way about their labor too?
For David, so the birth class that I took talked about vocalizing your breathing.
Okay.
And I think for some, probably for a lot of women even, that may be very helpful. But mine just turned into like yelling.
Sure.
But not yelling words. It was just very loud. I don't want to call it moaning because it wasn't even moaning. Mine was much more warlike.
Yeah.
And that was not in my, ideal picture of what I wanted my birth to be like. So with Augie, I tried singing because I had read another anecdote about a woman who was a musician and she sang her way through labor. And I thought, oh, hey, I'm a musician. Maybe I can do that. So I sang through labor, and I do think that helped a lot because then at some points when it was really hard, I wasn't thinking fully about what my body was feeling. I was thinking about what I was singing.
Sure.
Wanting to get the notes right and silliness, even wanting to sound pretty.
Sure.
So I think that did help. Everybody's got to find what works for them.
Yeah,
and
totally.
That one helped.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So going into your first daughter's birth,
yes,
things were a little different.
Things were, quite different. After the 2 boys, when we found out I was pregnant with Adelaide, I think that's immediately when I started reading Ina May Gaskin's Guide to Childbirth. And I can't remember the order that she puts the things in her book, but it's some really significant section of her book are women's birth stories. And so they're all just anecdotal. There's no scientific anything. But I read a few of those and overwhelmingly, and they weren't, I don't even think they were all birth stories that Miss Gaskins had attended. She had just compiled these.
Yeah.
But a majority of the births that were done at home or in her I guess, farm where she sets up individual cabins for birthing couples. Those stories just rang so much more peace and comfort and healing even than the ones that were in birth centers or hospitals.
Sure.
And she even included some birth stories about, women birthing on a hill. They went out to work this morning and then it was time to give birth. So they birthed on a hill and then they packed up and went home.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. Just based on my birth experiences, I don't think I could ever do that.
Sure.
But that is totally amazing.
Yeah.
That some women are able to do that. That's awesome. Anyways, I think that was a big influence on me thinking, I know what it's like to birth in a birth center. I would like to try it at home.
Sure. Yeah.
And I ran it by Tom thinking he might cringe at the idea. And he said, okay, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I support you. You're the one doing it.
Sure.
So
That's awesome.
that was also very comforting. I think if he had cringed at all about it, I might have doubted it. But he was totally supportive from the very beginning.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so great. So how is that, how would you contrast? Did it, the different parts or?
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Where to start?
Where to start? So the first part that was different is we had to figure out where the children would be.
Sure.
If we wanted them home. I know a lot of women are fine with their kids being home while they're birthing. But because this was my first home birth, I was not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And I also remembered how in the later parts of both labors, I was so interior that if somebody had asked me for something, I couldn't answer questions even. If somebody put a water bottle in my face, I would take a drink. But if they had asked me, do you want water? I wasn't going to answer them.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's not, my children are young. My oldest one is currently 3.
Sure.
So, and I thought that's, if my youngest one was currently 3 and I had olders, that might be okay. But the youngest one being 3 and then a 1.5-year-old, I need no distractions from them, but also I still want to be a good mother.
Yeah.
And so I think the best part was deciding that they would stay with their grandparents.
Not have that mom hat on
Right.
when you're trying to give birth. Yeah.
The mom hat off.
Yeah.
And just be the new baby mom hat.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to get this baby out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's get this baby out hat.
Yeah.
So that was very different. And then the second different part that was really quite exciting was knowing that we wouldn't have to go anywhere. Like once I started the flow of labor, we could just stay.
Sure.
We didn't have to pack a bag. We did have to have some supplies on hand, but the list was given to us, and so we just set everything out, and then it was done.
Yeah.
But we didn't have to pack a bag. I didn't have to think of contingency things to pack. We didn't have to calculate how long it was to get from one place to another, or what to do if there's a roadblock.
Sure.
It was just so peaceful knowing that I could just stay on the couch or in the bed.
Sure.
And if I had gotten to the point where I wanted to take all my clothes off, I wouldn't have to get redressed to go somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So that was comforting. And also just like reassuring that this was something that I wanted to do. And then also learning that we could rent a birth tub.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big part.
Awesome.
Because I have so much respect for women who can birth out of water.
Sure.
I can't do it.
Sure.
And that's a tool and I'm happy to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was another confirmation that this is like all these things were lining up, that this is something I can do.
Sure.
So then the next quest was to find a midwife
Yeah.
who would facilitate a home birth.
Yeah.
And I don't even think I called anyone else. I think after I talked to you, something clicked and I knew it was like, that's going to be her. She's going to do it.
Aw. Awesome.
So that was all the part leading up to the labor. So should we jump into labor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I wonder, it's been a little bit since Adelaide's pregnancy, but were there any tools you used different to prep for her birth?
Oh, yes.
I'm trying to remember. Yeah.
Yes. So I saw at one of my appointments at your birthing center, or the birthing center in Arlington, I saw the hypnobirthing book.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to mention my other birth class because it works for so many women.
Sure.
But I think it was not working as well for me.
Sure.
And so I wanted to try something new. And so I saw it on your bookshelf.
Yeah.
And then I went home and Googled it and watched YouTube reviews about it.
Yeah.
And just did all the research I could, when really I could have just asked you to borrow your book. But I think I wanted to know if this was something that was worth my time.
Totally. You only have so much time with 2 little ones. Yeah.
So I wanted to read the most quality thing. And overwhelmingly, actually not, it was split 50-50. I'm sure just like anything for any person, it works for some people, but not for others.
Sure.
But the reviews that said it was worth it, and it gave me some really good coping techniques, and I reread this book, for every pregnancy. Those, and the women sharing their birth stories from having read that book and taken the class, I thought, okay, it's worth reading.
Sure.
So I read that book, and I think I took notes, and I sent pictures, like I took pictures of it and then texted them to Tom, and I said, remember to do this, and then he started a file folder of things to do.
Aw. That's awesome.
So a lot of what I read in the hypnobirthing book was resonating with me.
Yeah.
That I thought, yes, okay.
Sure.
And some of it was breathing techniques, some of it was mental imagery, some of it was just things to say to myself or have Tom remind me of. And the other birth class kind of mentioned those same things, but maybe it's just the way this was presented was different. This I also used hypnobirthing tracks that I could find.
Yeah.
And those were very helpful to, I guess, to trigger me into relaxation.
Sure.
I didn't get that with the other class.
Okay.
But I think that was a big part. The passive triggers. Like all I had to do was push play.
Yeah.
And then that would trigger me into relaxation. And then the third book that I read, pardon me, that was so helpful in particular for me was Back Labor No More.
Yes.
Because
Such a great book.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Can I talk to pregnant women?
Please do. Exactly.
If you have experienced back labor, or you think you might experience back labor because maybe you have chronic back pain, I strongly recommend reading Back Labor No More.
Yeah.
It's just full of tips for not necessarily relieving back labor, but for helping the baby, once you're in labor, position correctly to go more quickly.
Yeah, to really descend well. Yeah,
yes, to descend well. And some things just can't be helped. Like if your baby is it posterior? That's just gonna hurt.
Yeah.
You're just gonna feel it.
Yeah.
But if the baby maybe is just stuck a little bit during early or middle labor, some part of labor, and just needs a little oomph to get head properly all the way down and tucked in, there are just some really good tips in there.
Yeah. It's a great one.
Yes. And she draws pictures, funny pictures.
Yeah.
So it's entertaining to read as well.
Yeah.
But that book helped. We used, I think, almost every tip in that book to get things going.
Yeah.
So I read those books, and then I felt even better about choosing home birth.
Sure.
And then Adelaide's labor started, I think, at night. My sister had come to town and brought her daughter. And so the boys were already spending the night with them.
Sure.
And I think that was a happy coincidence.
Sure.
Because that evening, labor started. And it seemed the same as with Augie. Like, very low-key, peaceful, kind of, I know what we're doing. This is early labor. It's going to be okay. And let's just finish watching our show and then go to bed.
Yeah.
And sleep. So we did that, and then we woke up the next morning, and I felt that the intensity had progressed quite a bit. I think the timing was the same, but they were much more intense. Oh, and I'm going to change my language now. Part of hypnobirthing language is to take some negative connotation words away from birthing.
Yeah.
Or maybe medical words that are not quite as feeling. When I say feeling, I don't mean like necessarily emotions, but like whole body feeling.
Sure.
And I'm going to call them waves or surges.
Yeah.
Because that really does kind of describe, I had a whole mental mind shift.
Yeah, that was a huge part of her story. Yeah.
From reading hypnobirthing was to change the language so that contractions really, it just sounds restrictive and contracting.
Yeah.
And constricting.
Right.
But wave or surge sounds much more flowy. And that imagery, I mean, just the words and the imagery, I think also helped in Adelaide's labor and how, I'm going to say peaceful it was.
Sure.
So that morning, Tom and I woke up and we ate breakfast and then we took a walk, and through every wave, I would ask him to hold my belly up. Because, once you're in labor, let's just help get that baby into position.
Yeah, those for people that don't know, those belly lifts are great to help potential back labor. Yeah.
So we walked, I don't know how long or how far we walked. That's not even important. But we took a good long walk with lifts, belly lifts. And when we got back, I think I just took another nap as much as I could. I'm so sorry.
It's totally fine. You're fine.
And then I think I called you late morning or early afternoon. I don't remember, but I said labor started and I'm not ready for you to come yet.
Sure.
So just letting you know.
Yeah.
So then, I just did all the things, but just the changing the language just felt so much fun. I just felt like I was hanging out at home instead of waiting.
Like I remember you saying it's another normal day. Like this is special, but it's just another normal day. My body doing another normal thing. That's it. We're not overthinking this.
Right. Oh, can I jump back to the Ina May Gaskin's book?
Yeah.
I love that she called childbirth just a normal thing. And that a lot of times we can get in our head building it up as something that's so special, and then it becomes special because maybe it's traumatic.
Yeah.
Versus just approaching it as a normal part of life. It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that shift also may have happened in the hypnobirthing book. She may have talked about that as well. But it's just a normal part of life. So just treat it that way.
Yeah.
Of course, pamper yourself if you want to, but
Yeah.
So that shift also was just, it's a normal day. I'm experiencing these waves. I think the baby's coming, but I'm not ready yet.
Sure.
So we continued on the same way, trying to relax and treat ourselves, especially with the kids being out of the house.
Yeah.
And then, I don't remember what time you called, but you said, I would like to come. Would you prefer me at this time or a later time? And I chose the later time, which I think was 7 or 7:30.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
And I think by that time, my labor had progressed rather well. I remember coping with these intense waves. I had never used the squatting position with either of my boys, but I read in one of the books several different positions for laboring women. Mm-hmm. And some of them I didn't feel like they would work.
Yeah.
And then others, I think at some point during the hard part of labor, I tried it and I thought, oh, this feels right.
Sure.
So I just listened to my body
Yeah.
and did it. And I'm so sorry. I'm jumping all over the place.
You're fine.
I want to back up a little bit and
Sure.
say that I remember asking you in some of our later appointments to not tell me how far I had progressed.
Not a number, yeah.
To not coach me to push.
Yeah.
To just let my body do it. And so we'll get to that.
Yeah. We talked a lot like fetal attraction reflex, all kinds of fun, like really awesome stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so listening to my body and getting out of my head, I think was a really big part. Mm-hmm. And this is going to sound so silly, but it worked for me.
Sure.
I had asked Tom to tell me that I am a gorilla or I am a lion.
Yeah.
Because to me, those animals are graceful and powerful.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed to hear.
Sure.
Is that I am strong and graceful.
Yeah.
And powerful enough to do this.
Yeah.
And so during each wave, I would lean on his knees and squat, and he would just tell me, you're a gorilla, you're a lion. And I'm sure from an outside perspective, it seemed ridiculous, but that is what I needed. And it worked.
Yeah.
It worked so beautifully. And I wasn't yelling, or if I was, I don't remember it.
Yeah, no, you were really quiet.
I remember just breathing very heavily through and breathing down through my spine, through the tip of my tailbone, and like out through my birth canal.
Yeah.
And that may have been what the midwife was telling me with Augie, was
Sure.
breathe down.
Sure.
But I didn't know what that meant at the time. And somehow the language in the hypnobirthing book kind of made that click. And so I was breathing that way, and I had the hypnobirthing playlist on. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember if I said this from a lying position or right after a wave, but I think I said, I need to get in the tub. Mm-hmm. And I believe you were like, okay, let's get in the tub.
Yeah, I remember, I feel like when I got there, I was like, oh, you're definitely really close. Then I feel like maybe you got in the shower or something while we were filling it up, because I was like, okay, she's gonna need this. And then it was perfect timing.
Yes.
Because you weren't in there very long.
No,
Yeah.
I remember getting in the tub, and I think I moved into transition, and I panicked just a little.
Yeah.
And then Tom said something. I don't remember what he said, but it calmed me down again. And then I leaned on him, and I think within like 2 or 3 pushes, but you weren't telling me. Like that was
Right.
just my body doing it.
Right.
She came out, and it was amazing. And you handed her to me, because Tom was behind me, so he was in the wrong direction to catch her.
Yeah.
But that's okay. And then you lifted her up to ask Tom to identify her sex. And the umbilical cord was right between her legs. And he said, I don't know. I can't see anything. What is it?
It was funny.
And so you told all of us that Adelaide was a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It was wonderful.
I remember Tom really specifically being surprised. Like, I think he asked me maybe quietly, you don't have to tell her to push. I was like, no, she's just going to do it. And he was so amazed. It was so sweet.
It was,
Yeah, it was really sweet.
Yeah.
And your sister got to be there.
She was there. Mm-hmm. And that was really special too. She kind of acted like a nonverbal doula for me. Mm-hmm. Just her presence was very calming.
Just holding the space. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And how was postpartum for you with her?
Oh, Postpartum with Adelaide was so easy. I was amazed at how easy it could be because I had not experienced that.
Yeah.
I had torn with both of my boys. And I was actually having a hard time not doing stuff.
Sure.
Because I felt so good.
Yeah.
Of course, it was a little tender, but everything healed, at least exteriorly, so much faster than with the boys, and I felt good. So I had to remind myself that I'm still recovering, and I should not do stuff for 2 weeks. Because with the boys, I just hurt. Like me not doing stuff was easy. If somebody asked me to do something, I said no. I can't.
Yeah.
And part of that was not just me standing up for myself and self-care. Part of it was just like, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't get up from this place right now.
Yeah.
But with Adelaide, if people made requests, I was like, yeah, okay, I can do that. And then I would catch myself like, no, I'm not going to do that right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard when you feel so good after natural birth to stay and rest and
It's a different kind of hard.
Yeah.
It's a delightful hard.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I'm so glad it was such a good experience. So with this baby, do you have any specific things you're planning to do to prepare or anything different?
I will probably reread a few excerpts from Hypnobirthing.
Yeah.
Just to refresh. I'm going to read Birthing from Within.
Yeah. Oh, I love that one.
I have that book. And I don't know that I'll do anything very different. I probably will ask for the same. You may do an exam, but don't tell me any numbers.
Sure.
And please don't coach me to push.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm thrilled, so thrilled with Adelaide's birth story. Like that was the birth that I had been wanting from the first, but I didn't know it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, I want to even say that my other midwives who were asking me or coaching me to push, I did not explicitly tell them not to.
Sure.
I had told them no interventions. Like I don't want, I can't even remember what some of the things are, so I'll have to refresh. But I remember telling them or requesting not this, that, or another thing. But I never explicitly asked them to not tell me to push.
Sure.
And I'll be honest, I don't know if they would have done that anyways.
Sure.
Because I get the feeling that was just kind of their MO.
Sure. Routine kind of. Yeah.
Yes. But they were very caring women.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, now that I know what it can be and I know exactly what I want and how to do that. I would just want everything exactly the same.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm so glad it was
Well,
everything
the
you wanted.
exterior circumstances exactly the same.
Right.
I understand that this is a whole different baby and a whole different pregnancy. And
Yeah.
It's going to be its own story.
Yeah, totally. Well, anything you would want maybe a first-time mom to know, planning her first birth, or any tips you would give her?
That is so hard because I remember even after Augie, after Augie it started to click. But even after David, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Sure.
Like I didn't know all the things that you could ask for.
Sure.
Or request not to.
Sure.
So, and this is going to be so silly because even before David, they, books and birth classes say picture your ideal birth and then write that birth plan.
Sure.
But I didn't even know what my ideal birth looked like.
Yeah.
So, because I didn't know that not being told to push was an option.
Yeah.
And that didn't even occur to me.
That's true. I remember having conversations about how it was even possible that your body would just do that on its own. As the baby comes down, your body would just do it. Yeah.
And every person learns differently. I apparently am a reader. So if you're a reader, read as many birth books as you can. Birth stories. Listen, it's a podcast.
Yeah.
Listen to birth stories if you're a podcast person, or read them if you're a reader. Or there are birth stories on YouTube. There are some graphic birth stories on YouTube, so don't put them on while your children are around. Oh, no, first-time moms. You wouldn't have children yet.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Still good too. First natural birth, maybe.
Yeah, maybe don't watch them, at your in-laws' house.
Sure.
And then also I would say be picky with your care provider. You are allowed to change care providers if you get the wrong vibe from them.
Yeah.
So if at any point you express a desire for one thing and your care provider says, well, I do it this way.
Yeah.
Or if you ever feel like you have to ask permission of your care provider for something, and they don't agree to that, you're allowed to change care providers.
Yeah, 100%.
I would say almost at any point during your pregnancy to find a care provider who will hold your values and your desires as importantly as you do.
Yeah.
And then once you find that care provider, hopefully you would be comfortable enough with them to ask all the questions about what it could be. Because I think I even asked you, what were some of the most peaceful births you've experienced, and what did those women do, without violating HIPAA or anything.
Sure.
And I think if you've got a good care provider, they can kind of even coach you into finding your ideal birth, especially because it's your first time and you don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point. Really, people shouldn't be afraid to ask questions of their care provider. Yeah, that's so true. And having the space to do that. Well, thank you for sharing your stories. I know it's just intimate things that you shared, so I so appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
I know you love sharing and encouraging other women, so thanks for coming on, Carrie.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll have to have you back for this baby's birth story.
I would love that.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let us know what you want to hear about, and if you've made it all the way to the end, please leave us a review. We would so appreciate that. Share about it. You can find more updates and things like that on my Instagram or Facebook. It's at Bethany Stricker Midwifery on Instagram, Bethany Stricker Midwifery Care on Facebook, and then just BethanyStricker.com for website stuff. And make sure you subscribe on Spotify or Apple so you can get notifications for further podcasts. Thanks for listening. Bye.